there's this huge kind of stereotype and obvious racism that we've all been experiencing as Asian Americans here in America.
Hi, I'm Gracie Mercedes, and welcome back to Not Blank Enough, a podcast about everyday insecurities and triumphs. Today, I'm chatting with Chriselle Lim, the Korean-American mom, content creator, and founder of bümo, talks about feeling foreign as a child in Korea, changing her appearance to fit in, and how the guilt of being a working mom led her to create the co-working space with childcare, bümo. All this and more in this insightful conversation we titled Not American Enough. Thank you, Chriselle, for being on Not Blank Enough, and welcome. So tell me where you're from and what your upbringing was like.
Yeah, so I am originally from Texas. I was born in Fort Worth, Texas, to be exact. Born there, raised in Northern California most of my life in the Bay Area. My parents are still there. And I lived in Korea for about 3 years, but went to a foreign school over there. So barely learned how to speak Korean, which I completely regret now.
I can relate with Spanish, yep.
Yes, exactly. And for the most part, I am a Korean American, so 100% Korean blood, but born here in America.
How old were you when you left Texas?
I was probably less than a year old, so I really don't remember anything. My parents went to college there, and so they had me while they're in college in Texas. And so they graduated shortly after I was born, and then we bounced. We went to San Jose in the Bay Area.
How was that growing up in San Jose?
It was amazing. Most of my childhood is in the Bay Area, mainly in San Jose. And so I don't know, I just have this amazing memory of just like playing, growing up there, having so much fun, like really figuring out who I was. And then I moved to Korea for about 3 years, right when I was in middle school. That was very challenging. And then when I moved back to California, it was in a small town called Danville. It's still in the Bay Area, but definitely not as diverse as San Jose was. So yeah, it was amazing. But definitely found myself feeling kind of like an outsider once I moved to Danville.
Yeah, tell me more about that. So was the school predominantly white then, or just not, or was there just not a lot of Asian representation?
It was predominantly white. There was probably about a total of 7 Asian kids in my high school. My high school was really big. And so I was probably 1 out of 3 in my grade. So yeah, for that reason, obviously in high school, I just felt awkward and strange. But kind of backstory before that, what is interesting enough is in San Jose, I was really young, right? So I was in, preschool, kindergarten, elementary school. And this whole idea of race and me being different didn't even really register at that time because I was a kid, right? And I just wanted to play with my friends.
Yeah.
So when we moved to Korea, that was when I actually understood race, which is strange because I am 100% Korean blood. I look Korean. I look full on Korean, but I've never felt more foreign in a country than in Korea. And that is because I'm Korean American. And that is when I realized that I am actually more American than I am Korean culturally. And so when I lived in Korea, it was really, really challenging for me because I went to a foreign school. It's called SFS, Seoul Foreign School. Most of my classmates were either Korean American or just white because they were there for like parents' work or they're missionaries in a foreign country. And all of our teachers were white in Korea.
Oh, wow.
So I almost lived in this little bubble within Korea. We even lived in a gated community in Korea that was for foreigners. And that was strange, right? Because it's like, this is where you live. This is the city where all the foreigners come to, even though I am Korean. And then I remember we would be going on our school bus and kids would literally, like the Korean kids that are not Korean American, they would literally throw rocks at our bus because they thought we were weird. They thought we were strange. And that is when I realized that I'm actually more American.
Mm-hmm.
And I was actually in complete shock because, I thought those were like my people. I thought I would be able to feel at home there because I looked like them, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it was very much a different experience. And, it's changed a lot. Now, when I go back to Korea, it's so much more welcoming. Everyone's a lot more culturally just educated. And I think that's what the internet has done, is that
Yeah.
people have realized that, you can't treat people certain ways, just because they're different, just because they don't speak your language, you can't be mean to them. So it's changed a lot, but in the early 90s, like that's what it was like
Yeah.
being a Korean American in Korea.
How old were you when that was going on?
I was probably in third grade, third to sixth
Oh,
grade.
so pretty young, formative ages. And
Yeah.
it's so interesting because I find that happens all the time. Like I studied abroad in Madrid in college, and I remember thinking like it's so funny in America we want to put each other in so many different boxes. And now like there was a bunch of American kids together in Madrid and we were all just considered American. Like it didn't matter that I was Dominican American and she was Italian American and he was,
Mm.
Asian American. It was like, no, you're all just American. Like we don't really care about your ethnic background. You're just American. And how Americans don't really a lot of times identify with that first. Like I'm American first. A lot of times, especially if you come from some kind of, ethnic background, that's kind of your identification first. But then as soon as
Yeah,
you leave the country, no one cares.
exactly.
So maybe that was a time where you were feeling not Korean enough, I guess, because you were more the American girl in Korea, even though you're Korean.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's when I was like, I need to go back to my home. I need to go back home. I need to go back to California. Like, that is my home. And so I was so stuck on moving back to America because my idea of America before I moved to Korea was inclusive. And I just felt like I was with people and people didn't look at me differently. But when I grew up in San Jose, it was a lot more diverse, right? And there was like Asian people, there were white people, there were Black people, there were Hispanics. Like it was just a melting pot in San Jose. So when I moved back, when we got news that my dad was going to be transferred back, it was like the best day ever because I was so excited to go back to California to my people.
Mm-hmm.
But little did I know we were moving to a small town called Danville, which is it's more so in the East Bay, probably an hour away from San Jose.
Mm-hmm.
To my surprise, when I went there, I was literally one out of three Asian people in my grade. And I felt once again super foreign. And I
Right.
just felt like I was in another country. I naturally gravitated towards the Asian people, the Asian Americans. And I think this begs the question of like, when you see a group of Asians like in high school or a group of like Black people together or
Mm-hmm.
a group of Latinas together, you're just like, I wonder why they only hang out with each other. And it's, and
Yeah.
now looking back on it, it's because we had the same experience and we don't
Mm-hmm.
have to explain ourselves. So I literally hung out with like the three Asian people in my school and we were outcasted by all the other folks. Maybe everyone was figuring out their own identity. It was in middle school and high school, so it was challenging enough, but I realized that I also was not American enough. I wasn't Korean enough in Korea, and I was not American enough in America. The prime years of middle school and high school was me figuring out who I was and what does it mean to be a Korean American. And to be honest, at that time, because I was struggling with my own identity and my own confidence, I hated being Korean American. I was like, why can't I just be white? Why can't
Mm-hmm.
I just look like everyone else? And so a lot of that time was me literally covering my face with horrendous makeup just so I could cover up like my slanted eyes to make them look bigger or to look tanner because I was too fair. Like I wanted to look tan and gorgeous,
Mm.
like all the American girls. And so it was a lot of that. I look back on my photos and I'm like, oh my goodness, thank God my mom didn't tell me. I mean, I wish she told me something, but she like really embraced me for like
Aw.
what I was going through. So I'm very
Yeah.
thankful for that.
Yeah, it's it's so funny. I mean, at this point we've done about 30 something interviews and almost every person of color has said that at some point they didn't feel white enough or they didn't feel American enough. And it's so interesting because it's so subversive. It's just like what's being thrown at us all the time. So you might not really realize, but it's like everything you watch on TV, everything you read, everything you see in a magazine. It's like, this is what America is, or this is what Americans should look like. And then you don't fit that mold, you constantly feel like, oh, I'm not enough, or I don't look this way enough. And we're already just trying to figure ourselves out so much at that age. And then to have that on top is just so crazy.
And you're just like starting puberty. So it's it's all those things mixed together.
All of it.
Yeah, but that also brings up a great point of media, right? Like back in the early 90s, there was absolutely no representation on media, entertainment, on the big screens. There was one person, her name was Suchin Pak, who was the first, Asian woman on MTV. She's one of my closest friends now.
Yeah,
but,
I know Suchin. I used to work at MTV.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, she worked with my husband, Damien, actually.
Oh, incredible.
Yeah.
Small world. But yeah, she was literally the only person that I grew up watching on TV that looked like me. And there was really no representation. And obviously at that age, you're so interested in pop culture. You're like, as a girl growing up, you compare yourself to what you look up to, right? So for me, it was Spice Girls, it was Pamela Anderson, Britney Spears,
Yep.
And none of them looked like me. So my whole goal back then was to look more like them. And everything from skin color to eyebrows, eye shape, how I dress. But the interesting thing was, one thing I knew I could control was maybe not how my face will look, because makeup can only hide so much, but my fashion. And that's how I actually got into fashion, was because I would spend so much time and money on just getting dressed every morning because people would compliment me, people of all colors, all genders, races, like everyone would compliment me for my outfits. And I realized that that was one way for me to actually feel like I fit in and I could be accepted, right? And that is when my obsession with fashion started to happen, was early on in middle school, was when I just became obsessed with, just putting looks together. And I guess, it served its purpose to where I'm at now, but that is how I kind of got through those years.
Oh, that's so interesting. What a great way. That makes so much sense because one of our things, especially in school, is that like that's your only way to express yourself, really. I didn't have that. I went to an all girls Catholic school, so we had to wear a uniform. But I remember it was just like, even like the boots or the shoes that we chose, that was like how we got to express ourselves, or our hair. So did you go to college? And if so, where did you go and what was that like?
Yeah. So immediately after I graduated high school in Danville, I moved to LA because I knew that I just wanted to be in LA or New York, as most girls in fashion want to.
Right.
And so my parents said no to New York, but they said yes to LA. So I moved to LA. That is when I realized that there's so many Asian people in LA. And I was like, I was like literally mind blown. I was like, where was I this whole time? Like, I thought America was just, what I saw in Danville. And so that is how it all started. So I actually went to Cal Poly Pomona for about half a year because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I knew deep down as I wanted to do fashion, but I knew that my parents weren't going to be accepting of it, and they wouldn't, I didn't really know how to navigate that. So I just went into accounting, which is so random.
So different.
I'm the worst with numbers. And so I went to Cal Poly Pomona, and they actually have a small agriculture department. I was like, that sounds interesting. That sounds like it can lead to fashion. So I signed up for one class. It was a textile class. And that is when I was like, whoa, people actually study this. Like, they actually study textiles to create fashion and clothes. And that's when I was like, it clicked. I was like, I can't be at the school. Like, I need to be at a school where they have more classes like this. And so that's when I convinced my parents that I could drop out.
Oh, wow.
And so they weren't supportive, but I said, I'm going to do it anyways. I'm going to get a job and I want to go to a fashion school. And so FITM was the closest thing in LA that I kept hearing about. That was when The Hills was like happening. And I think Lauren Conrad went
Right.
to FITM, and I was like, I need to go to FITM.
I love it.
Yeah. And so I ended up at FITM, and I ended up getting my degree there.
It's such a MTV generation. Like
Totally an MTV generation.
I am actually older than you, quite a little bit older than you, but I worked at MTV for so long. So all those like references are just so fresh in my head. And I was like, yeah, they kind of molded my 20s. And so I could
Yeah.
totally see how you'd be like watching it. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go there. So I love that you were like, okay, parents, I love you, I respect you, but I'm doing this thing anyway. Because a lot of people are scared to do that and wouldn't be brave enough to do that.
Well, I think it was a little bit of me knowing that my parents would end up supporting me anyways, just because I know how they are. They always tell me no, and that's just their personality. And until I prove to them that I'm really serious about something, then they'll kind of accept and support me. And so I knew that I kind of had to do that on my own first to show them how serious I was.
And then what was school like? How did you feel going? So can you go from this small town where, there wasn't that much diversity. Now you're in LA, surrounded by diversity, especially in the Asian community. I was actually surprised by that when I moved here from New York, that I was like, whoa, I'm used to like the Asian people I knew were like Chinese, and that was basically it. And then out here, you're like, well, you have Thai, you have Korean, you have, there's just so many different, little pockets, neighborhoods and stuff too.
Yeah.
How was that transition for you?
I had so much fun, like a little too much fun. I started partying a little bit. I discovered nightlife in LA, Hollywood. What was happening when I first came here?
What year was that?
Ladue area.
Oh my God.
Yeah. That's actually how I met my husband too, at area. So typical LA.
Oh, wow. Well, that's good. I partied too much when I first moved to LA too. I think that just happens when you get here.
Yeah. And I used to go to like Asian nights. They would have these Asian nights where it was just like all Asian people. I was like mind blown. I was like, what is this?
That's amazing.
And I just had the best time. I had so much fun. I finally felt like I felt confident in my skin of who I was, because there were so many people that had similar stories and backgrounds like I did. And I think it just takes that of like seeing somebody have similar backgrounds and love themselves. And you're like, I could do that too. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I mean, I had a lot of fun. I met my kind of like crew. I created my little posse, I guess you can say.
Mm-hmm.
But what really kind of got me settled in LA was working in fashion. So to be completely honest, I was a horrible student, even when I went to FITM. And I was always on the pulse of like getting hands-on experience. So I like to call myself the intern whore. Like I literally interned everywhere, like every magazine you could think of, every stylist, every showroom. And I just became obsessed with kind of creating my network early on.
Smart.
And so I would actually miss a lot of classes because my internships were demanding, right? Especially in fashion. And back then was when there was no intern laws or rules, when they would like literally work you like slaves.
Yeah.
Won't name drop any brands or showrooms or people here.
Right.
Because now it would not be okay to do that. But we were literally just like grinding it out, right?
Yeah.
And I loved it. I loved every minute of it. Of course, like I was exhausted, but I think that's when I really developed kind of my work ethic. And so majority of my college years was working and also partying.
I mean, that's a good college years, I feel like.
Yeah.
You're supposed to do work and party and, figure out what you're going to do. I'm a huge believer in hands-on experience. I think in retrospect, I'm like, why did I go to NYU? Why did we spend all that money? I feel like everything I learned was hands-on, like was through internships or through PAing or through like just actually doing it. Whereas college feels more like this, like 4 years of meeting people, figuring yourself out. And then like, yeah, sure, you're taking classes, but do I remember anything that I learned in any class at college? I don't know if I do actually. So
yeah,
I'm totally with you with the hands-on experience.
Yeah, for sure.
And then after college, tell me a little bit about your work journey and what you started to do.
So I was actually interning and assisting a stylist, a celebrity stylist. Her name is Tanya Gill, and she would. I think her main clients at the time were like Hilary Swank and Jewel and a bunch of these kind of like A-list celebrities. And so immediately after, I became more of like a full-time assistant to her, and I just worked with her for about, I'd say, I think about a year, right after college. And then from there, that's when I actually got a job position at a luxury magazine called Gen Lux. It's a Los Angeles magazine. And I started off as like a fashion editor, and then I worked myself up to be the fashion director of one of the departments in LA. And so I did that, mainly focused on editorial styling, and really got my hands dirty on kind of like the behind the scenes of what it takes to create beautiful imagery, which I absolutely fell in love with. And that was like my heart and my soul. And was when actually YouTube started taking off, and I met Michelle Phan. So my husband, his best friend was dating Michelle Phan at the time.
Oh, wow.
And I had no idea what YouTube was. You know, Michelle Phan, for those of you who don't know, she is like the OG beauty guru on all of YouTube. And she pretty much termed beauty guru. And so I met up with her, and we just like were chatting. The guys were hanging out, and I was like, "So what do you do?" And she's like, "Oh, I'm a makeup artist." And then she was like, "Oh, I create videos." And I just started asking more and more questions, and I became fascinated with what she did for a living. And then this was pre-Instagram, but she had a Twitter, I remember, and I just got myself into this really dark hole of figuring out this whole Twitter YouTube space.
Yeah.
And I found it so fascinating. And I immediately asked her, I was like, "Hey, I kind of want to like try out my own video." And she's like, "I'll help you." She was like super nice about it. So she helped me with my first video, uploaded it. And literally within like 2 days, it had 500,000 views, which is,
oh my God, what?
which is a lot for back then. Even it is still till this day. Right. Yeah. And that's when I was like, whoa, because I come from the editorial world, and 500,000 views to me, viewership was a lot, because I was comparing it to kind of the readers that I had on the magazine side, right?
Right.
And so I was like, I have the equivalent of that, but someone is watching me. They're not reading through a magazine, right? So I kind of understood that was the equivalent of what it was on digital. And I always viewed digital space as kind of more of like this editorial format, but with video. I quickly adapted to the space, and I just started cranking out content. This was probably like 13 years ago. And I don't know. I don't even know where to start. That is how it all started, really, for me. And I haven't really stopped since. So yeah.
You really haven't. You really have. I mean, I remember seeing your YouTube videos and being like, who is this girl? These are amazing. And that's kind of around the time I started blogging. And so I was learning about the world and how I wanted to fit into that world. And video for me was fun and made sense because I've always wanted to be an actor. So I was like, oh, I'll be in front of the camera. But then I was like, oh, this is a lot of work, and this is very hard, and you need help. And I'm not good at editing, and I'm not good at this. And I eventually learned all those things, and eventually kind of focused more on my blog, and then Instagram popped up. But I was always very impressed by your videos. And so that's really cool to hear that it was just so kind of organic for you, that you just kind of flawlessly entered that space and conquered it, really, because you're still on YouTube, right? You're still doing YouTube content?
I wouldn't consider myself a YouTuber anymore. I used to identify with being a YouTuber maybe about 2 years ago, because I was uploading YouTube videos every week for the past 10 years of my life. But I actually kind of slowed down and stopped for the past 2 years, really focusing on other platforms like TikTok and Instagram and podcasting now. So yeah, I mean, I think this video is going on YouTube, so it'll be funny to hear people's reaction to this. But I feel like, not that I've outgrown the platform, but people have kind of outgrown me, because I've just been on the space for so long. When that's the nature of the business, and you just have to accept it, right? And I was so like, I think for the last 2 years, I was really trying to figure out why people were not watching my videos anymore. And I was like, it's because I've been on this platform for over 10 years, and I've given everything that I could. And at this point, quite frankly, people are probably bored of me. And there's so much amazing talent, new talent, right, that is rising. And that's just the nature of media in general, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you just have to figure out what your next few steps are. And so I've accepted that, and not saying that I don't upload YouTube videos at all. I still do like randomly here and there, but it's not my main thing anymore.
I love that you said that because it is so true. And I don't think a lot of people are honest about that. And I think like I feel that similarly. Like I feel like that with Instagram now because I feel like, well, I moved away from blogging. I'm focusing on these other things. These people who followed me initially for fashion, I'm not really giving that to them anymore. So of course they're gonna like move on. Or like I
Yeah.
did feel that it's and part of the reason I moved on from it was because I did start to feel like I've been doing this for 8 years. I'm no longer the new girl, the fresh girl. I'm no longer one of very few women of color in it because that space was definitely dominated, I think, by white girls. As more people crop up, yeah, you're no longer the fresh face. You're no longer the in person. I was kind of okay with that. I was like, well, I had my time. I did great. I
Yeah.
made my money. I made my connections, and then now I can move on to new things that I'm excited about and can be the new person at. And it's totally something that happens, I think, in general with artists. I mean, think about all our favorite actors or musicians that have like their hot time and then they kind of go
Yeah.
away for a little while and they come back and then they go away for and they reinvent themselves. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as creators, it's personal, right? Like what we put out there is personal. So, if someone doesn't watch it or if someone doesn't like it or if there's bad feedback, it's easy to take things personally into the heart, right? And so, of course, when I was putting out videos towards like the latter end of my YouTube career, I was a little offended. I was like, why are people
Mhm.
not watching this? Am I just not young enough? Am I not like, which is perfect for this podcast because it's not blank enough, right?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Um, I am on the other side of the spectrum now where I am mature enough to realize that the, everything evolves and it's going to continue to evolve with or without you. And you have to figure out how you're going to reinvent yourself. And so, for me, it was figuring out what it is that one I enjoyed doing again, and to what freshness, what ideas, new ideas I can bring to the table where people were excited. And for me, it's been strangely enough TikTok, which is a whole new audience for me because it's Gen Z, right? I'm way older than them. I could be their mom basically. But they've never heard of my content. They didn't even know who I was. They didn't even know that I had a YouTube channel. And
Right.
so when I first started TikTok, I felt like the early days of YouTube. And I was like, I have these ideas. Like, people don't know who I am here. Like, I want to push the boundaries. I want to do like these skits. I want to do like all these weird things. And I was having fun again. I felt like alive again. And I think people can tell when you're having fun because then the content just organically blows up, right? Without you obsessing over it. And so, yeah, I mean, that's what has happened to me.
I love that so much. And I like that you touched on feeling maybe not young enough because I feel like with TikTok, especially when I know when I went on there, I was like, oh my God, like I felt so old between how young everyone on there was and then also just how to me wasn't very user friendly. I was like, I do not understand how to record these videos. Like I had to look at all these tutorials. It lasted about a month for me, but I love that you own up to that you were just like, nah, this is a great new space because these people don't know who I am and I can reinvent myself.
I mean, I'm their rich mom. Like, they literally called me their mom. Like, I mean, it's funny because I am pretty much their mom's age. They find my content humorous and and it's not even my fashion content that they're really into. It's just kind of my personality driven content. So at first I was really insecure, like, yeah, these are all kids, like they are not gonna be able to relate to me. But I think it's because of that. They can't relate to me because I'm so much older than them and they find it fascinating. So I guess it worked out.
Yeah, I love that. And then so now where are we? So it's 2021. What's your like day to day like and what are you up to?
Obviously, things have massively changed since the pandemic. I'm working from home mainly. I have a startup called bümo, which actually was an idea I had about 5 years ago, actually 6 years ago when I had my first daughter, Chloe. Long story short, I realized after becoming a mom that there was really no support for working mothers. working parents, so specifically mothers, I felt like I had to choose one or the other, which is either being a mom or continue with my career. And I felt so shitty about choosing to work because it almost like society made me feel like I chose my career over my kids, which in fact is not, right? I would leave them at daycare all day and I would work. And that's totally normal for working parents, right? But I just felt so guilty, as most parents do. And I said, there has to be something in this world where I can do both successfully, where I feel like I'm a present parent and where I could thrive in my career. And there really wasn't. There were like little co-working spaces that had unlicensed childcare, meaning that they could like watch your kids for maybe 2-3 hours, but they can't like change their diapers, they can't feed them. So basically, you're going to be interrupted like every hour, right? Even though it was better than nothing, it wasn't a long-term solution. So I said, I'm going to build my own. I'm going to build my own workspace where there's fully licensed childcare. And that is how bümo was born. bümo is the very first of its kind, which is fully licensed childcare, bringing it to the workplace, whether it be corporate offices, corporate buildings, shopping centers, to be able to support working parents and not feel like they have to choose one or the other. It's something that I think a lot of parents have realized that they needed while they're stuck at home with their kids, because when you're at home with your kids, even though you're with your kids, you can't be present with them because you're working. You can't put your best work in either because you're being interrupted all the time. So I've been working out of there and it's been magical because it's like.
So wait, it's a workspace that you would go to work at, but then there's also like a daycare kind of element where licensed people are taking care of your kids like right next to you?
Yeah, so it's all under one roof.
Oh, wow.
On one side is this beautiful co-working space, members only. You could walk in, have your own office, and then you just like cross the hallway and it's literally maybe 10 steps away. And there is a beautiful modern childcare facilities, which is a bümo brand facilities. They're right there. And it's so crazy to say because this whole week I've been working out of there with my children. And it's a different feeling when you know that you could just literally step like a few steps and your children are there. It almost brings like the sense of ease of like, oh, okay, like if something happens, I'm here.
Right.
Or like, oh, they're doing this like really cute class. Like I want to see it. I want to be a part of it. I don't want to miss out on that. They could jump on in. And because so much of my time as a working parent, especially with Chloe, my oldest, I felt like I missed out on so much of her first like 5 years of her life because I couldn't be there, right? Whereas now with my daughter Colette, she's 2.5. I feel like I'm with her too much because I see so much of everything that she does, and I don't feel guilty anymore. I've like come to terms with it, but I always tell myself, I wish I had this for Chloe. You know, I wish I was more present with Chloe, and that's what bümo work enables parents to do, is to do both really. And there's a crazy statistics, especially now with the pandemic, the amount of mothers that had to quit their jobs because of lack of support. And this will really kind of solve that problem for parents. So that is what I've been working on for the past few years. And I'm so excited because it's finally opened. We've been working on this concept for so many years. It was actually supposed to open up last year, spring, but because of COVID, we had to kind of switch gears, but we're finally opening. We are on the second floor of Westfield Century City, prime location, right next to Italy. And Bloomingdale's.
Yeah.
So you could do everything all in one spot. Literally yesterday I was there with my kids. I picked up a birthday present for grandpa. I got dinner. I picked up groceries. I got my nails done all within 1 hour.
What?
Yeah.
What?
It was like, and I also picked up my kids because they were at bümo work. It was amazing.
That's incredible. What a great idea. And I'm like kind of shocked that it's not more commonplace, that this wasn't a thing that actually already existed and is everywhere, because it seems like something so many people, women especially, would need and appreciate.
I mean, we always say that it's like so groundbreaking because it's not. That's the problem, is that it's not groundbreaking. And that's sad that no one has figured it out. And, you know, I think a lot of companies now, especially after the pandemic, are figuring out ways to support their working parents because, you know, it's the millennial generation right now that are all having kids, and they are majority of the workforce, especially in tech companies. And a lot of them, because they don't have the support, they're losing talent, right?
Oh, wow.
And they're also not able to attract talent either, because millennial parents, being a good present parent is a priority for them. It's important to them. So if a company doesn't have benefits to support the working parents, then they lose
Yeah.
out on really great talent. So we're also talking to a lot of companies right now to integrate bümo work into their workspace as well.
Great. So you have bümo, and then you're still content creating as well?
Not as much, but I'm just a lot smarter about it. I just have a lot less time to create content than before, between the kids and my venture with bümo. But I'm a lot smarter. I probably carve out 2 days out of the week to focus on mass creating content. TikToks, my Instagram, to sponsorships, to podcasting. We all kind of cram that up in 2 solid days.
Wow. What's your podcast?
Yeah. It's called Being Bümo, and it's a parenting podcast. So everything from experts to other celebrities and influencers that have, interesting experiences being parents.
And today, is there a blank that you still, I don't want to say struggling with, because sometimes our blanks are actually helpful to us and they kind of propel us into our greatness, or make us do, maybe do something we wouldn't have normally done. But is there anything now that you feel that you might have a blank about, whether that's personal or work related? Or
I would just like to bring up, and maybe this is a good way to segue or end this conversation with, but it's with all the Asian hate crimes happening right now, I think the conversation is not being American enough. That is something that I've experienced early on, as we talked about coming to America, right?
Yeah.
But also being born here in Texas, still not feeling American enough, right? Especially with the pandemic and, certain leaders in certain places calling the virus the Kung flu virus or the China virus. There's this huge kind of stereotype and obvious racism that we've all been experiencing as Asian Americans here in America. Funny story, yesterday, I actually haven't told this to anyone yet, because I was actually so busy that I couldn't even think about it until I actually had a moment this morning. And me and my daughters, we were on our way to bümo work, and we're about to get into the elevator, and there was 2 Caucasian ladies, and one of the ladies, she was like, I was going to go in after her, right? It was a big elevator. And she looked at me and she was like, please go in the next one.
Oh,
and I was like, okay. I don't know. Maybe it's because of the pandemic. I don't know. It could also be because I'm Asian. I don't know. I'm not going to jump to conclusions there. But because of the uptick in just Asian hate crimes, I have become very cautious of my surroundings, right? And it just makes me feel sad feeling this way. I was getting gas yesterday, and I was looking around, making sure I was safe, and my kids were in the car, right? And I'm like, man, I am 35 years old. I've been in America for almost 32 years, right? And I feel like I might get attacked at this point, right? Because people might think I'm from China or Asia, somewhere in Asia, and it's really sad. And I had talked to my parents about it as well, because they understand what's going on, but they're taking it a little bit more lightly than we are. And I just told them they can't walk around by themselves, because it's the elders that are getting attacked right now. It's not feeling American enough. And I actually did a IGTV on this topic, but it's simple things that racism isn't always in your face, though it is in our faces right now. And I'm sure you've experienced this as well.
Yeah.
But it's small questions, like asking someone, so where are you from? And when I tell them that I'm actually from here, they're like, oh no, but where are you really from? I'm like, I'm actually really from here. I know where they're going at, and their intentions are not bad, right? And it's just a matter of curiosity of where my heritage is from and what my bloodline is. But I think it's these words that will continue to make us feel like perpetual foreigners and not really feel American enough. And so I'm having these conversations openly on my platforms to educate people, not to make people feel embarrassed, because look, I've been there before as well, right? But it's just to bring awareness so everyone could understand that words do matter.
Absolutely. And it's those microaggressions that perpetuate things and racism. And I think that's the most important thing to get across. I think so many people, they get defensive and they're like, I'm not racist, or, but it's like, I think people only see racism as the extreme, as the Asian woman getting beat up, as someone saying the N-word, as, these very extreme forms that are clearly racist. And you don't really realize the small things that people of color have to deal with every single day of their lives, and the constant microaggressions and the constant like hyper awareness of your surroundings, and being the only Black, Asian, Hispanic person in the room and what that feels like. And yeah, I think it's really great that we talk about it, and people who are not of color can understand, the kind of things that we have to deal with every day. And maybe that will help educate them, and maybe help them educate, their families and friends, so that this stuff stops happening, because it's absolutely terrible.
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, I think a lot of people are like, oh, well, I'm not racist, as you mentioned, but it's not about that. Like obviously, if you're like doing these horrible things, we shouldn't be even talking to you at this point.
Right.
But it's really the microaggression, as you mentioned, that sometimes we don't even notice, right? Because we've just let it slide and get away with it. Now is the time to actually call those things out, to bring awareness, again, not to attack people, because we all can get better,
Right.
And I have to say also, it's intimidating to talk about these things for people that are just learning about it. So for me, I always try to speak about it in a very kind of neutral way, so people just feel like they're learning something versus me like attacking them.
Right.
And so I think for influencers and people with the platform, it's very important that if someone wants to learn something and learn more about a culture or systematic racism or things that they were really not aware of, we are teaching them in a way where they feel comfortable and they want to learn.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Not shunning or... Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. I totally get it. Okay. So then we will name the episode Not American Enough. And then lastly, can you just tell everyone where they can find you?
You could find me at Chriselle Lim on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, if you're watching this on YouTube. Also, if you're a parent, make sure to listen to my podcast, which is Being Bümo.
Yay. Well, thank you so much, Chriselle. This was so great to catch up with you.
Thank you. It's so nice to see you, and hope we can see each other in person one day soon.
So soon. So soon. Thank you for listening to Not Blank Enough with me, Gracie Mercedes. You can find out more about today's guest in the show notes. Please subscribe to Not Blank Enough wherever you get your podcast, and follow us on Instagram at Not Blank Enough Pod. Also, if you like what you hear, please consider a rate and review. Our show today was executive produced by Gracie Mercedes and Dave Hill, and produced by Douglas Sarine and Colleen Beasley. Not Blank Enough is a Gumption Pictures production.